In our news, our correspondent Felicity Ezewike spoke with Ayo Tubanjo on reasons why we are having loss of human hair, rather.
Hair shedding is part of everyday life. Despite its attendant challenges, the fact remains that hair loss is normal. According to research, most humans on the average lose around 80 strands a day. When it comes to hair loss, there are so many potential triggers, which means it can be tricky to pinpoint the exact reason why strands are falling out. A senior consultant with Vinci Hair Clinic and the regional CEO for the group, Ayo Tubanjo, joins us in the studio to help us understand what causes hair loss and how to manage it. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you very much.
What causes hair loss? Is it natural?
Well, there are several causes of hair loss. There are what we call androgynous causes, basically affects men and women. There are those that affect just men, and there are those that affect just women, or mostly women. There are possibly about 6 types of hair loss or alopecias. You've got the androgenetic alopecia, which is the genetic form of hair loss, which affects possibly about 60 to 70% of men, and about 40% of women as well. And then you've got traction alopecia, which is probably very common in Africa, especially in Nigeria, amongst Nigerian women, to do with all the tight waving, and braids that, women do. And then you've got, other types of alopecia, like alopecia universalis, which is really a medical condition. Usually people that have autoimmune disease would typically experience alopecia universalis or alopecia totalis, which is the total loss of hair on the body. So there are different types of hair loss. The causes also vary. So for instance, the androgenetic alopecia, well, basically you inherit the genes. There's nothing you could do really to prevent it, except possibly to look out for the early signs, which is when your hair starts thinning. Then you come to the clinic and we could then stop that process.
Is there other ways to identify when you begin to lose your hair, or what could trigger it?
Right. Like I said, there are different types of alopecia. So for instance, the traction alopecia, which is very common with African women because of the tie braiding, you normally see, when you take the braids out, the hair comes out with it. And over a period of time of doing the same tie braiding, you seem to be losing more and more hair, and your hairline is not being restored. Because basically the follicles in the frontal area of the scalp are the most delicate. So when you keep pulling in the course of doing a braid, you damage them and you kill them off. And that's why people go bald in that region of the scalp.
Is it like only hereditary, or we can induce it by what we do?
Well, certain practices induces hair loss. Traction alopecia is an example of induced hair loss. Cicatricia alopecia is another induced hair loss. I mean, that's even a more insidious kind of hair loss because of the nature of it. But there are others, that are not induced. They're not self-inflicted, should we say. Okay. For instance, alopecia areata, which is another type of hair loss, kind of sudden loss of hair. You go to bed, the next morning you wake up
and you don't have any hair anymore.
Patches of hair is gone.
For those that are induced, I'm sure a lot of women watching this program would want to know what are the possible treatments? Right.
There are several possible treatments. Traction alopecia, for instance, once the hair in the fringe have gone, the only option is to have a transplant, hair transplant. And lots of people probably think, wow, can you really do that? The answer is yes. And we are doing it in Lagos. So you can have your hairline restored. With regards to certain other types of alopecia, for instance, the cicatricia alopecia, that's more insidious because most cases, it leaves a scar on the scalp. And with scar, it's very difficult, to get a successful hair transplant. So, that's why, we tend to, prescribe a different course of action for somebody.
How lasting is this transplant, and what are the possible effects to the person's health?
Transplant is permanent. Absolutely permanent. Once the new follicles have been implanted surgically, which is what we do, that's it. They last forever. As long as you don't go back to doing all the bad things that you were doing to lose your hair in the first place, you'll be fine. And there aren't any side effects. It's what we call microsurgery. It's not even major surgery by any means.
Okay, how can people who have experienced hair loss better manage it? Especially, I know that it could be expensive to get this hair transplant done. For those that don't have that kind of money and still want to maintain their hairlines, how can they do it? I
think prevention is better than cure, like the saying goes. So taking active steps to prevent the hair loss, and this is one of the reasons why, I'm on your show, to educate people. So for instance, when you go to a salon and one of the salon attendants about to apply some product on your scalp, I think the sensible thing to do is to look at the product and actually see whether it's been approved for human use, and usually you look for signs such as the FDA, which is the Food and Drug Administration in the US, or NAFDAC in Nigeria. If a product hasn't gone through that testing, that rigorous testing process, don't allow anyone to apply it on your scalp, because you don't know what you're applying. You could be applying some really, really toxic, very damaging chemicals.
Thank you very much, sir, for coming on the program.
You're welcome. Thank you for inviting me.